Welcome to Progressive Independence. I'm Michael Wilk in Cleveland, and I thought I had put this issue to rest in my last video, which, by the way, got way more views than I expected, and I'm actually quite grateful to the responses. Overall, you know, they're pretty positive. You get a few Kyle Kulinski trolls who, you know, just don't want to admit that their guy fucked up. But you know, I do thank you for the likes and the views. I'll continue to try and live up to expectations. But you know, I was actually trying to put this to rest and move on. But then Kyle Kulinski issued a video over the weekend that was basically a half-assed and half-hearted apology for attacking Jimmy Dore and trying to explain himself. And don't get me wrong, I'm not going to go ahead and bash Kyle for apologizing for the things he did apologize for, but then he doubled down on, you know, his worst lies that he told in his previous video on the subject, and I felt the need to kind of point them out and go over why he doubled down. Now, you know, again, he did apologize for some things, all right? He apologized for leaving out that Anna Kasparian was blackmailing Jimmy, or trying to blackmail him, and that, you know, he was you know, overlooking that. He did not apologize or even acknowledge the deceptively edited video of Max Blumenthal's reaction to Jimmy's account of what had happened. And he also continued to give this bullshit excuse of, you know, why he thinks Jimmy was in the wrong and supposedly slut-shaming Anna when nothing was actually the case. The other thing he apologized for, which was actually a non-apology because, you know, he was dishonest in rendering his apology, was in ghosting Jimmy Dore and having Cenk Uygur's nephew on. So I'm going to go ahead and let you be the judge. I'm going to play the video clips here, and, you know, you watch them, and I'll link to it below in the description and also up here in the top corner, along with Primo Radical's interview with Jimmy Dore on the subject. But yeah, just you watch and be the judge.
Crystal and I were planning to have Jimmy on Crystal, Kyle, and Friends one day. We were planning to have Cenk on Crystal, Kyle, and Friends one day. And then as we watched this, we decided, you know what? We don't want to have either one of them on right now, because then we would be responsible for getting in the middle of this absolute mess. And we would have to ask really uncomfortable questions that are really personal in nature, and I don't want to have anything to do with some personal shit.
That's not true.
Nothing at all. I care about policy. I don't care about personal shit. When I said there, listen, if he comes on Crystal, Kyle, and Friends, I'm obligated. I have a responsibility to ask questions about this. Now, I'm going to ask questions not that I think are unfair, not that I think feed into the smear or validate the smear. I would ask a question like, hey, when they threatened you, when Anna threatened you, when she effectively blackmailed you, and you were swatting aside the allegations, it was an unfair situation. But in retrospect, do you feel like you worded everything right? Or would you sort of change the way you did it because you did go a little too far, talk about she's dressing inappropriately and effectively slut-shamed her? But I would have felt like a fraud if I didn't ask him a tough but fair question like that. So what did I do? I did what I thought was the better thing for me, because I don't want to deal with the personal strife, but also for him, because he would think it's an unfair question, and so I punted. I didn't want him on. So when he's talking there, shaking his head saying that's not true, when what I'm saying is definitely true. My point is, if I have you on, I have to ask about this. I don't have a choice. I view it as my responsibility, my obligation. See, that's the problem. We're now at an impasse, and we're never going to see eye to eye on that. And so, even though I agree with Jimmy completely that effectively he was blackmailed, he was threatened, and it's unfair, and he has every right to swat aside those allegations, and I'm happy he did, and he should do that. But the way he did it went a little overboard, and he was slut-shaming Anna. I'm sorry, I think that's a fact, even though Jimmy's my friend. And so I would have had to ask him a question on that. He's shaking his head like, no. In other words, Jimmy wanted to come on the podcast and also just not have me ask anything about that. Or if I did ask anything about that, frame it 100% from his perspective. Well, Jimmy, I got bad news for you, man. In this whole debate and argument, I'm probably 85 or 90% with you, and I'm only 10% or 15% with TYT, but I'm going to have to ask the questions for that 10 or 15% because that's me being intellectually honest, and I can't not be intellectually honest.
Well, what happened was they booked me like a month earlier, right? So on June 1st, I was texting with Crystal, and I said, she asked me to tweet out their new show. She was like, hey, could you help promote our new show? And I said, done. I did it. I helped promote their new show. And I said, looking forward to Kyle, KKF. Kyle has not floated any dates to me yet. And she said, all right, I'll bug him and thank you. You've always been so good to us, and I am truly grateful. And so you heard Kyle also refer to me on the Joe Rogan clip as his good friend. So the way they treated me after this was not like you would treat a friend or even an enemy. The way they treated me was unbelievably rude and unprofessional to the extreme.
So this is where it gets upsetting because Jimmy is about to get into, he views a lot of the things that he's about to explain, he views a lot of them as like really terrible slights and like Crystal and I taking pot shots and being super rude, bordering on evil to him. And all I can say, and I'll break it down as we go along here, is he's reading too much into it. He's misinterpreting it. None of this had any malice or malintent whatsoever. We weren't slighting him even a little bit. And, this is what I mean when I say he's got that nuclear gear and he's going nuclear. I mean, listen, he's showing private texts here. I'm not going to make a big deal of it. He's going to show one of mine in a second as well. But I do think if the roles were reversed and I was showing his texts to me and without his approval, I do think he would view that as like inexcusable on its own. Listen, again, I think Jimmy means well. I think he's an honest guy. I think he's a very passionate guy. But I do think this is an area where he's just going to misinterpret and view a lot of things as slights that are not at all slights. Continue.
So you see that I have a date booked. So she gives me the date. I picked June 24th. So when June 44th comes around, I'm ready to go do this show. And I realize they haven't given me a link. They haven't, nothing. There's no text reminding me, no nothing. So we're supposed to go at 10 a.m. and at 5 to 10, I texted them both saying, hey, I have this on my calendar today. Are we still doing it? And they ghosted me. So they decided not to have me on the show, and they didn't tell me. They didn't send me an email the day ahead of time or even the day or whatever, nothing. And they didn't respond to my text when I sent it to them. They just ghosted me. And then about 2.5 hours later, in the afternoon, so I was supposed to do it at 10 a.m., around 12:30, they sent me a text. And here's the text, okay? And the reason why I bring this up is because Kyle brought it up. So now that's why I'm bringing this up. So I'm going to tell you. So here's my text. Are we doing a show today? My calendar says we are. And Kyle says, hey, Jimmy. So again, that was, at 2.5 hours later, after they ghosted me, he says, hey, Jimmy, we are trying to stay as far away from the war between you and Aaron and TYT as possible. On the policy, we agree much more with you, Russia, Syria, forced to vote, etc. We're disturbed by Anna's attacks on Aaron, but we also didn't like the way you talked about Anna's dress. Huh? What? The effing F? Are you kidding me? That's my good friend?
Yeah. So, again, I would have had to ask you about that, man. I didn't want to ask you about that. And I would have asked you, again, in what I view as a completely fair way. Yes, I think that they threatened you, and that's totally unfair and is totally unjust. You have every right to swat aside those allegations, and I'm glad you did. But when you did go overboard, and you did slut-shame her. So I think it would have been a fair question to say, hey, do you think you went a little too far in the language that you used afterwards? I know you don't think it's fair. I think that's a fair question. And so I would have had to ask that question. And so in my opinion, the best thing I could possibly do was get as far away from the situation as possible and not have any of you guys on the show. Now, instead of trying for a second to see maybe why I would take this position, he's viewing it as a phenomenal slight. Now, by the way, let me correct the record here. He says we ghosted him. Jimmy, we didn't ghost you. We responded literally as soon as we could We were recording a show, which is why it took over 2 hours for us to respond to you. But as soon as we saw your text, we responded. We talked for about 5 minutes to try to determine what the best response would be. And we decided, just be completely honest. Be completely honest. Hey, we want to get as far away from the war as possible. We hope you understand. And honestly, we're so naive, we thought there was a chance you'd be like, yeah, I get it. It's gotten ugly. There's blackmail and there's #MeToo stuff, and you guys are going for each other's intentions, and you're saying you're grifters, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of this ended up in court. So I wouldn't, I don't blame you for not wanting to get involved. But he didn't see it like that. He didn't see it like that. Now, it's time for an apology though, because he's right about something here, and it's a very important thing, and I want to make no excuses for it whatsoever. We were flat out wrong to do it. We should have told him the day before. Or the day before that. We should have told him at some point leading up to the interview that, hey man, we don't think we can do it. We don't want to do it. We want to be as far away from this as possible. And also, I just don't want to ask you a question that I know you think is unfair, but I think is perfectly fair.
So my reaction to this, all right, like I said, I'm glad that Kyle apologized for the things that he did apologize for. But, there's some things that he knows for a fact he's still in the wrong on, and he's just is not big enough of a man to admit it. So I'm going to go ahead and break it down a little bit. So Kyle's half-assed apology regarding blowing off Jimmy is dishonest and insincere. He admits he should have given Jimmy advance notice that their segment was canceled, but he ignored Jimmy's text because, as he admits, he and Crystal were busy recording with Cenk Uygur's nephew, who was dunking on Jimmy, and they were laughing along. And, instead of scolding Hassan and saying, hey, look, can we just not do the Jimmy thing? All right, we don't want to talk about that. We don't want to get involved. But instead, they let him go on. And then, on top of that, Kyle says that, the reason he didn't want to have Jimmy on was because he didn't want to put himself in the position of asking a question he knew would make Jimmy angry, which was, why didn't you slut shame Anna Kasparian? Well, first of all, Jimmy did not slut shame Anna Kasparian, and if you had him on like you said you would, and let him talk about his version of it, and would have let him explain, but you doubled down on the lie that he was slut shaming her, and for a fact that he wasn't, because again, most office or just general workplace settings have dress codes, not for religious purposes, not for because people are being prudes, but to maintain a professional atmosphere where people feel, safer and more comfortable. Because newsflash, people do have sexual boundaries. Doesn't matter if you don't, other people do. And people do not necessarily appreciate someone walking in and revealing clothing and exposing himself or herself. What you're leaving out in your lie is that this is, the case in something like, I want to say 99% of jobs, you're going to find that company dress code policy because it's there to go ahead and do that. And Anna Kasparian was the one committing sexual harassment by, going around and basically flashing her students and her employees and practically daring them to say something. Now, you can have your issues with the way that Jimmy Dore busted her for it by saying, hey, Anna, nice new skirt, because, that was, that apparently humiliated her. And, I'm not going to lie, I probably would have said something similar because I don't believe in pulling punches or holding back, like Jimmy. I tell the truth and I'm unfiltered. Now, yeah, he could have said, hey, Anna, you might want to consider, not dressing like that because people can see your rear end or whatever. But, how far would he have gotten with that? But, at any rate, he apologized for it. He sent her a card. He made, he tried to make it right at the time that he committed the alleged wrong. But Kyle Kulinski is making it sound as though Jimmy Dore was somehow slut-shaming Anna. And he's acting like a white knight, and it's like, dude, what are you smoking? And why didn't you bring it up for everyone else to share? Because, if you think people are going to be that stupid, that they're going to believe that kind of cockamamie bullshit, and most of the people who chimed in on your Twitter threads, and I know because I responded to it, and it's pretty epically hilarious, and you can see it right here. But this is an instance in which you clearly lied. You lied. You got called out for it, and your stubborn Polak pride, and I know because I'm half Polak myself, just like you, Kyle, your pride will not let you just admit that you picked a bad argument to attack Jimmy with, and you know it. I mean, you're halfway there in terms of trying to make this right, but you need to go all the way. Now, in terms of your dismissing Jimmy's reaction to your dishonest blowing him off and having it on Cenk Uygur's nephew to trash talk him and have your chuckles at his expense, you dismissed that as Jimmy taking this as a slight and overreacting, and then saying that it wasn't a slight. But the fact is, it very much was a slight, because you scheduled Jimmy to appear on your show. You don't give him any notification that you decided to cancel. You let him think he's being ghosted because you were ghosting him. And you did this because you were, as you admit, in the middle of recording that segment with Uygur's nephew, in which you all proceeded to have your chuckles at Jimmy's expense. And you knew this was unprofessional, rude, childish behavior. So yes, Jimmy took it as a slight, because that is exactly what it is. Would you have gotten away with this if you had pulled that stunt with Joe Rogan, who has a much bigger audience and therefore a much bigger platform, to basically put the word out that you were a lying scumbag? No, you wouldn't dare pull that with Joe Rogan, because he's bigger than you in terms of platform and in terms of audience reach. Instead, you punched down on someone whose you thought was, small potatoes and therefore wouldn't be able to fight back. Well, guess what? You picked a fight with someone who's inclined to fight back. So sorry that you got your little snowflake feelings hurt, Kyle, but you waded into this. You chose to pick a fight with Jimmy Dore, and now you're complaining because you're saying, oh, now the Young Turks, aren't going to have me on anymore. Now Jimmy hates me, and I've lost all these friends. But you chose to alienate Jimmy Dore. You didn't have to, and you knew you didn't have to. So I don't know what your major malfunction is. And also, again, you failed to acknowledge that you deceptively edited the video of Max Blumenthal to misconstrue his reaction to learning of Kasparian's blackmail attempt. And you really should have brought that up and mentioned it in your half-assed apology video. But it's like you're trying to have it both ways, and you're complaining that you wanted to stay out of the whole feud and lying that you were dragged into it. And you're lamenting now that you've lost all your friends because you're also alienating TYT, which, it's kind of a cop-out because you're having Cenk's nephew on, which is kind of like having him on by osmosis, because, even though Cenk's nephew doesn't necessarily agree with his uncle on a lot of stuff, but he's still going to, defend his uncle on big stuff because, they're family. So, you're trying to say, oh, it was nothing personal, but you made it personal. I mean, don't try this Michael Corleone bullshit. Oh, it's just business. No, you made it personal. And, you got the blowback for it. And you manned up a little bit and apologized for some of the things that you did wrong, but not everything. So, in my opinion, Kyle Kulinski is generally a good guy, okay? He's trying to do well, smug Bill Maher-esque attitude aside, he tries to do well and report the truth. But he just is not able to bring himself to admit all the things that he did wrong, and that he chose to wade into this feud between TYT and Jimmy Dore and Aaron Matei, and tried to both sides the issue as though they were all in the wrong, and for a fact that they weren't all in the wrong, that Aaron and Jimmy, in fact, were the victims of a deliberate smear campaign. And you lied about Jimmy Dore and accused him of slut-shaming someone when you know for a fact he didn't. So, if you really want to mend fences, Kyle, And I have no reason to believe that you're going to watch this video or read my tweets or my columns, because, you know, I'm still relatively new to this, and you know, I only do this part-time. I can't afford to do it full-time because I'm not getting paid for this. And I have a full-time job. So, you know, chances of my becoming a big enough YouTube channel that you're even going to notice this are pretty small. But the off chance that you do, it's my hope that you actually take what I've said seriously and understand, you know, that you're not fooling anyone, and that, you know, you did wrong, you screwed up, you alienated your friend, and if you want to patch things over with him, you're going to have to admit to everything you did wrong and apologize for all of it, and quit trying to have it both ways, and, you know, just grow up. I mean, you're in your 30s, all right? You know better than to kind of pull this infantile baloney. You know, I don't know if, you know, Cenk and Anna, you know, said, like, you know, hey, you know, remember where you're getting your paychecks from, you know, and directed you to, you know, try to attack Jimmy, attack Jimmy, you know. But, you know, it just seems to me like, you know, you chose to get in the middle of this, you know, protestations to the contrary notwithstanding, and you know, now you have to dig yourself out, but you're not going to do that if you keep digging a deeper hole by only retracting half of what you did wrong. You need to retract it all. So anyway, you know, let me know in the comments, viewers, what you think. You know, I don't expect to cover this again, you know, unless something new develops that I feel is worth reporting, because, you know, there comes a point where you have to just move on and address other stuff. I don't want to build my channel exclusively on calling out frauds and failures on the pseudo left, because I want to report on more. So anyway, that's it for this episode of Progressive Independence. This is Michael Wilk in Cleveland saying good night and good luck.